My phone lit up at 2:14 a.m. with a voicemail from my mother. Her voice, usually dripping with honeyed manipulation, was ice cold. "The papers are signed. We don't need you anymore. Don't come back." She thought she had won, but she completely forgot who controlled the money. If you looked at the Whitmore family from the outside, you would see a portrait of Pacific Northwest royalty. My father, Jonathan Whitmore, built a logistics empire from the ground up in Seattle. We had the Bellevue Mansion, the membership at the country club, and the pristine, curated image that my mother, Evelyn, guarded with her life. But behind the imported mahogany doors, our family dynamic was a toxic, ticking time bomb. I was the workhorse. My older brother, Nathan, was the golden child. Growing up, Nathan could do no wrong. When he crashed his brand new Audi into a neighbour's retaining wall at 19, my mother blamed the neighbour for building the wall too close to the road. When he dropped out of 3 different private colleges, it was because the professors stifled his creative genius. Meanwhile, I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in finance, took an entry-level job at my father's firm, and worked 80-hour weeks just to get a nod of approval from across the dinner table. Everything shattered 5 years ago when my father suffered a massive, fatal heart attack. The grief was blinding, but the reading of his will was what truly blew our family apart. My father wasn't blind to his family's flaws. He knew my mother was a compulsive spendthrift who cared more about designer galas than financial security. He also knew Nathan was a charming parasite. So, in a move that caused my mother to scream so loudly she lost her voice for a week, my father left the entirety of his liquid assets, roughly $12 million, in the Whitmore family trust, and he named me, his 26-year-old daughter Samantha, as the sole trustee and executor. I was given absolute, unmitigated control over the purse strings. My mother and brother received generous monthly allowances, but any major purchases, investments, or property sales had to be explicitly approved and signed off by me. It was my father's final, desperate attempt to protect them from themselves. To say my mother resented me for this would be the understatement of the century. Almost overnight, I transformed in her eyes from her daughter into a draconian bank manager. For 5 years, I endured the guilt trips, the crying fits, and the vicious family dinners. "Your brother just needs an $800,000 seed investment for his new app." "Samantha," my mother would hiss over Thanksgiving turkey. Her eyes narrowed. "Your father would have wanted him to be an entrepreneur. Why are you purposely suffocating your own flesh and blood?" I had looked into Nathan's app. It was a wildly illegal cryptocurrency shell game that would have landed him in federal prison. I said no. Nathan didn't speak to me for 6 months. But 6 months ago, my mother came to me with an olive branch. She wanted to downsize from the massive, empty Bellevue estate, which was eating up property taxes, and buy a modest luxury property in Medina, right on the water. It was listed at $5.8 million. "It's going to be our fresh start, Sam," she told me over coffee, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. It was the first time she had touched me affectionately in years. "I want to host your wedding there. I want a place for us to finally be a real family. Please." I found the perfect house. I wanted to believe her. God help me. I was 26 when my dad died. And now at 31, I was so utterly exhausted from fighting my own family. I just wanted my mother to love me. I wanted peace. So, I agreed. I spent weeks liquidating certain stock portfolios, absorbing the capital gains tax hits, and working tirelessly with our real estate agent, Brenner Carmichael, to negotiate the price down to $5.4 million. I was the one fielding calls at midnight from title companies. I was the one wiring the $500,000 earnest money deposit. The closing date was set for a Friday in late October. It was supposed to be a triumph. I had secured the house for my mother, entirely funded by the trust, and the deed was to be held securely under the Whitmore Family Trust's name, ensuring the asset remained protected. The Tuesday before closing, I had to fly out to Chicago for an unavoidable supply chain conference for my own company. I was exhausted, living on airport coffee and sheer adrenaline, but I felt a profound sense of relief. The heavy lifting was done. My fiancé, Greg, texted me from back home in Seattle. "You did it, babe. You finally made them happy. Let's celebrate when you get back." I truly believed the worst was behind us. I had no idea they had been plotting to destroy me for months. Chicago in October is relentlessly windy and bitter. I was wrapped in a thick wool coat, sitting by the window of my hotel room on the 14th floor, watching the city lights blur through the rain. It was 2:14 a.m. on Thursday morning. The house deal in Medina was scheduled to officially close the following afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific time. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen illuminated the dark room. Incoming call. Mom. A spike of panic hit my chest. My mother never called this late unless someone was dead or in jail. I scrambled to grab the phone, but my thumb fumbled, and the call went to voicemail. I immediately tried calling her back. It rang 5 times and went to her pristine, automated greeting. A minute later, the voicemail notification popped up. I tapped the icon and held the phone to my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs. First, there was a heavy sigh, followed by the clinking of a glass, probably her favourite Waterford crystal wine glass. Then came her voice. It wasn't the warm, pleading tone she had used at the coffee shop months ago. It was a voice I hadn't heard since I was a teenager, the icy, venomous tone she reserved for telemarketers and waitstaff who got her order wrong. "The papers are signed," she said, her words slightly slurred but terrifyingly deliberate. "We don't need you anymore. Don't come back." I froze. A cold sweat broke out across my hairline. What papers? I thought. What does she mean she doesn't need me? I expected the voicemail to end there. But then there was a shuffling sound, the fabric of a pocket or a purse rustling against the microphone. She had forgotten to end the call. For the next 4 minutes, I sat in agonizing silence in my Chicago hotel room, listening to a conversation that would permanently alter the trajectory of my life. Did it go to voicemail? It was Nathan's voice, muffled but distinct in the background. "Yes," my mother replied, her voice echoing slightly, as if she had set the phone down on the granite kitchen island. "I told her not to come back. God, I have been waiting 5 years to say that to the little bitch." My breath hitched. My own mother. "Are you sure the lawyer got the addendum through?" Nathan asked, sounding uncharacteristically anxious. "If she checks the portal tomorrow morning, she's in Chicago, Nathan." "She's busy playing CEO," my mother scoffed. "And yes, I spoke to Richard this afternoon. The moment the wire transfer clears tomorrow at 3 p.m., the title isn't going into the Whitmore Family Trust. It's going directly into the new entity, Medina Holdings, LLC. "And she has zero access to the LLC?" Nathan pressed. "Zero." My mother laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. "You and I are the sole managing members. Once the house is in the LLC, we are immediately pulling a line of credit against the equity. You'll have the $2 million for your crypto launch by Monday, and I'll have the house. We're finally free of her, Nate. Jonathan must be rolling in his grave, but he's not here to protect her anymore. I still can't believe she signed the power of attorney form," Nathan chuckled. "She really thought it was just for the utility transfers." My blood ran completely cold. The room started to spin. A week ago, amidst a mountain of closing documents, my mother had frantically shoved a paper in front of me as I was rushing out the door to the airport. "It's just to authorize me to set up the water and electricity in my name, Sam. The city needs it today," she had cried. I was stressed, late for my flight, and I trusted her. I had signed it without reading the fine print. They hadn't just used a POA for utilities. They had used it to completely restructure the closing documents behind my back. They had instructed the escrow company to change the vesting of the property at the 11th hour. Because I had already authorized the $5.4 million wire transfer from the trust to the escrow account, the money was just sitting there, waiting for the clock to strike 3 p.m. on Friday to fund a house that I would have absolutely zero legal claim to. They were using my father's trust money to buy a house they secretly owned, and then they were going to immediately drain the equity to fund Nathan's delusional, guaranteed to fail crypto scam. They were stealing $5.4 million right out from under me. And once it was done, they were locking me out of the family forever. She's going to lose her mind, Nathan said on the recording. Let her, my mother replied coldly. What is she going to do? Sue us. She cares too much about the family name to drag us into court. She's weak, just like her father. The line finally went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time. The sadness, the deep, aching grief of realizing your mother truly, fundamentally despises you washed over me in a suffocating wave. I cried until my chest physically ached. I cried for the 20-year-old girl who gave up her 20s to manage her father's estate. I cried for the daughter who just wanted a family home. But when the tears stopped, something else took their place. It started as a spark in the pit of my stomach and quickly grew into a roaring, blinding inferno. They thought I was weak. They thought because I had spent my life cleaning up their messes, I would just lie down and let them financially execute me. They thought my father was weak. I wiped my eyes, marched over to the hotel desk, and opened my laptop. It was 3:30 a.m. in Chicago, 1:30 a.m. in Seattle. I didn't call Greg. I didn't call my mother. I dialed the emergency cell phone number of Tom Gallagher, the senior partner at my father's old law firm and the co-architect of the Whitmore Family Trust. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. Sam, is everything all right? Are you hurt? Tom, I said, my voice shockingly steady, completely devoid of the girl who had just been crying. I need you to wake up. I need you at your computer right now. Sam. It's the middle of the night. My mother and Nathan are attempting to defraud the trust of $5.4 million using a fraudulently obtained power of attorney to divert the Medina property into a private LLC, I stated flatly. The wire is sitting in escrow. It clears at 3 p.m. today. I heard the sound of a bedstand lamp clicking on through the receiver. Tom's tone instantly shifted from sleepy grandfather to apex predator attorney. Talk to me. I explained everything. I forwarded him the audio file of the voicemail. I told him about the utility document I had signed. They're using a rogue lawyer named Richard, I added. I don't know his last name, but he's facilitating the title alteration with the escrow company. If they used a limited POA obtained under false pretenses to alter a real estate transaction funded by a trust they do not control, that is wire fraud, Samantha. That is a federal crime, Tom said, his keyboard clacking furiously in the background. But escrow is already funded. We have less than 14 hours before the county records the deed and the money vanishes into their LLC, once they pull a line of credit against it. Untangling this will take years in litigation. Then we don't let it close, I said. I'm drafting an emergency injunction to halt the escrow, Tom replied. But Sam, you need to understand the magnitude of this. If I file this in the morning, I am legally freezing the entire Whitmore Family Trust. Every asset, every account, every credit card attached to it. Your mother's allowance, Nathan's trust card, everything goes to zero instantly pending a fraud investigation. You will be detonating a nuclear bomb on your family. I looked out the window at the dark, storm-battered skyline of Chicago. I thought about Nathan laughing. I thought about my mother calling me a bitch. The papers are signed. We don't need you anymore. Do it, Tom, I whispered, the final thread of my familial loyalty snapping. Freeze everything. Kill the deal. And Tom, yes, Sam, make sure Brenna Carmichael gets a copy of the injunction. Let my mother show up to the final walkthrough tomorrow to find out she doesn't have a dime to her name. Consider it done, Tom said. I hung up the phone. I didn't sleep a single wink that night. I sat by the window, watching the sun rise, waiting for 3 p.m. I was about to teach my mother a very expensive lesson about who really held the power. Friday in Chicago was a blur of fluorescent lights, meaningless PowerPoint presentations, and suffocating anxiety. I was physically sitting in a plush conference room at the McCormick Place Convention Center, surrounded by 300 logistics executives. But mentally, I was 3,000 miles away in a sterile escrow office in downtown Bellevue. Every time my phone screen lit up with an email notification, my pulse hammered in my ears. Tom Gallagher had been working relentlessly since our 3:30 a.m. phone call. By 9 a.m. Pacific time, he had a judge sign the emergency injunction. By 10:30 a.m., he had served the bank, freezing the entire Whitmore family trust and immediately recalling the $5.4 million wire that was sitting in the title company's escrow account. And by noon, he had frozen every single credit card, debit card, and checking account tied to my mother's and Nathan's social security numbers that drew from the trust's umbrella. But I didn't want them to know. Not yet. I wanted them to walk into that closing meeting believing they had won. I wanted them to taste the victory right before it turned to ash in their mouths. At exactly 3:15 p.m. Pacific time, 5:15 p.m. in Chicago, my phone began to vibrate violently on the conference table. The caller ID flashed. Brenna Carmichael. I slipped out of the double doors into the quiet, carpeted hallway, my hands shaking slightly as I pressed the phone to my ear. Brenna? Tell me everything. Sam. Brenna exhaled, her voice a mixture of absolute shock and professional awe. I have been in luxury real estate for 22 years, and I have never, ever seen anything like what just happened in that room. Are they gone? I asked, leaning against the cool wallpaper. They were escorted out by building security 10 minutes ago, she said, lowering her voice as if someone might overhear her. Sam, they walked in there like they owned the world. Your mother was wearing her white Chanel suit. Nathan had a bottle of Dom Perignon tucked under his arm. They didn't even look at me. They just demanded that Patricia, the senior escrow officer, bring them the final signature pages for Medina Holdings LLC. And Patricia is a fortress. Brenna chuckled nervously. She walked into the glass-walled conference room empty-handed. No closing binder, no pens. She just looked at your mother and said, Miss Seuss. Whitmore, I'm afraid the transaction has been terminated. According to Brenna, my mother had laughed, assuming it was a joke or a minor paperwork delay. She had waved her hand dismissively, told Patricia to stop being dramatic, and ordered her to call the bank to verify the wire. That's when Patricia slid the legal notice across the table, Brenna recounted. She told them, very calmly, that the $5.4 million wire had been federally recalled due to a court-ordered fraud injunction filed by the sole trustee, Samantha Whitmore. She also informed them that the power of attorney document they submitted had been flagged as fraudulently obtained. My breath hitched. What did my mother do? She lost her absolute mind, Sam. The mask completely slipped. She started screaming that you were a vindictive, jealous little girl who was trying to ruin her life. She grabbed her phone to call her lawyer, that slimy guy, Richard Caldwell, but it went straight to his voicemail. The second he got wind of a federal fraud injunction, he ghosted them. It was exactly what Tom had predicted. Bottom-feeding lawyers like Caldwell were happy to bend the rules for a quick payday, but they scattered like roaches when the spotlight of a federal judge hit them. Nathan tried to salvage it, Brenna continued. He told Patricia they would just cover the earnest money penalty and escrow fees themselves to keep the contract alive over the weekend until they could sort out this misunderstanding. He pulled out his platinum trust card and slammed it on the table. I closed my eyes, a grim, humorless smile touching my lips. Let me guess. Declined, Brenna said. Patricia ran it right there in the room. Declined. Then your mother pulled out her 2 black cards. Declined. They tried 4 different cards, Sam. Every single one. Bounced. They didn't even have enough liquidity to pay the $150 parking garage fee downstairs. Your mother threw her champagne glass at the wall, it shattered everywhere, and that's when Patricia hit the panic button under the desk and called security. I let out a long, shuddering breath. The relief was intoxicating, but it was heavily laced with a profound, hollow sadness. I had just financially obliterated my own family. Brenna, I am so sorry you had to be caught in the middle of this, I said softly. Don't you dare apologize to me, Samantha, Brenna replied fiercely. I saw the addendum they tried to slip in. They were trying to steal millions from you and leave you holding the bag. You protected yourself. But Sam, be careful. People like your mother and brother do not handle losing well. She wasn't wrong. The moment I hung up with Brenna, my phone screen transformed into a waterfall of notifications. Missed call. Mom. 41. Missed call. Nathan. 28. Text from Mom. How dare you? Answer the phone. Text from Nathan. You are dead to us. You better fix this right now or I swear to God, Sam. Text from Mum. Call the bank now. You are publicly humiliating me. The country club will hear about this. I didn't answer a single one. I powered down my phone, walked out of the convention center, and hailed a cab to a deep dish pizza place. For the first time in 5 years, I ate dinner without worrying about what crisis my family was manufacturing back home. I left my phone off for the entire weekend. It was the ultimate power move. They had spent my entire life demanding my immediate attention, using my anxiety as a leash. By going completely dark, I left them trapped in their sprawling Bellevue mansion with no money, no lawyer, and no audience for their hysterics. My fiancé, Greg, was my only lifeline. He called my hotel room from his secure work line on Saturday morning. They showed up at our apartment last night, Greg told me, his voice tight with anger. Nathan was pounding on the door for 20 minutes. The concierge finally threatened to call the police, and they left. Babe, they are completely unhinged. Your mother's car got impounded this morning. What? I gasped. Sitting up in my hotel bed, she tried to use her trust card to pay the valet at her hair salon. When it declined, she threw a fit and tried to just drive off, but she bumped another client's Mercedes. When the cops arrived and ran her plates, it flagged the emergency asset freeze Tom put on the trust. They towed her Porsche. I rubbed my temples. It was turning into a circus, but it was a circus of their own making. I'm flying back Monday morning, Greg. Tell Tom to set a meeting at his office for 1 p.m. Tell him to mandate their attendance if they ever want to see a single dime again. Monday afternoon in Seattle was slate grey and pouring rain, fitting weather for a funeral. And make no mistake, we were burying the Whitmore family that day. I walked into the mahogany-panelled conference room at Gallagher and Associates right at 1 p.m. Greg was by my side, his hand a warm, grounding presence at the small of my back. Tom Gallagher sat at the head of the table, a thick manila folder resting ominously in front of him. My mother and Nathan were already there. The transformation in just 3 days was staggering. My mother, usually impeccably styled, looked haggard. Her roots were showing, and she was wearing the same trench coat she had been wearing on Friday. Nathan looked like a cornered animal, nervously bouncing his leg and chewing his thumbnail. They hadn't been able to hire a new lawyer. No reputable firm would take them without a retainer, and they didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. The moment I walked in, my mother stood up, her eyes flashing with a desperate, venomous energy. Samantha! Finally! Tell this arrogant man to lift the freeze on my accounts right now. The grocery delivery service refused my order this morning. I am living like a peasant. Sit down, Evelyn, Tom commanded, his voice like cracking thunder. He didn't use her title. He didn't call her Mrs. Whitmore. My mother blinked, shocked by his tone, and slowly sank back into her leather chair. I took my seat opposite them, folding my hands on the table. You aren't getting your cards back, Mum. Sam, this is a massive misunderstanding, Nathan interjected, leaning forward, trying to use his golden boy charm. Richard Caldwell completely messed up the paperwork. We didn't tell him to change the vesting to an LLC. He did that on his own. We would never try to cut you out of the house. You're our sister. You overreacted by calling the bank. I stared at him. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply reached into my purse, pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, connected it to my phone, and pressed play. The pristine acoustics of the boardroom amplified the recording perfectly. Did it go to voicemail? Yes. I told her not to come back. God, I have been waiting 5 years to say that to the little bitch. Are you sure the lawyer got the addendum through? The moment the wire transfer clears tomorrow, at 3 p.m., it's going directly into the new entity, Medina Holdings, LLC. And she has zero access to the LLC? Zero. You'll have the $2 million for your crypto launch by Monday, and I'll have the house. I let the recording play to the very end, right up until my mother called me and my dead father weak. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathan's face had drained of all colour, turning an ashen, sickly grey. My mother stared at the speaker, her mouth slightly open, the realization of her catastrophic error finally sinking in. She had dug her own grave, handed me the shovel, and left the instructions on my voicemail. That was taken out of context, my mother stammered, though her voice lacked any of its usual conviction. Wire fraud carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison, Tom stated, leaning forward, his eyes boring into them. Using a fraudulently obtained power of attorney to divert $5.4 million across state lines is an open and shut case. I have drafted a comprehensive summary of your actions, complete with the escrow communications, the fake addendum, and this audio recording. All it takes is one phone call to the FBI field office, and you will both be in handcuffs by dinner. No! My mother shrieked, tears finally spilling over her mascara. Samantha, please! I'm your mother! You wouldn't send your own mother to prison. I was desperate. You control everything. It isn't fair. What isn't fair, Mum, is what Tom discovered this morning while auditing the trust's physical assets to prepare for the injunction, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. I looked at Tom, and he opened the manila folder. He slid a single piece of paper across the polished wood table. It was a pawn shop receipt. In order to pay Richard Caldwell's $50,000 retainer to facilitate your little LLC scheme, Tom said disgustedly. Evelyn removed an item from the family safe last Tuesday. My heart broke all over again. You pawned Grandma Whitmore's sapphire necklace, Mom. The one Dad explicitly left to me in his will for my wedding day. You stole my inheritance to pay a shady lawyer to steal my money. My mother put her face in her hands and began to sob hysterically. Nathan just stared at the table, utterly defeated. Here are the new terms of your existence, I said, standing up. I was done. The girl who desperately wanted her mother's approval had died in that Chicago hotel room. I am not pressing federal charges, entirely because I refuse to drag my father's company name through a public criminal trial. But the Whitmore Family Trust, as you knew it, is dead. I pointed at Nathan. You are completely cut off. You will not receive another dollar from the trust, ever. You are 32 years old. Get a job, or go homeless. I do not care. Nathan looked up, terrified. Sam, please, I have rent. I don't care. I repeated, my voice like ice. I turned to my mother. The Bellevue mansion goes on the market tomorrow. Brenna Carmichael has already drafted the listing agreement. You will be moving into a 2-bedroom condo in Linwood that the trust will purchase and own outright. Your allowance is gone. A third-party fiduciary appointed by Tom will pay your basic utilities and provide you with a $800 weekly grocery and living stipend. If you attempt to open a line of credit, contact a lawyer to contest this, or speak to me ever again. I will hand this entire file to the FBI. You can't leave me with nothing, my mother wept, looking up at me with ruined eyes. I'm your family. You're right, I said, looking down at the woman who had tormented me for my entire adult life. The papers are signed. I don't need you anymore. Don't come back. I turned on my heel and walked out of the boardroom, Greg's hand firmly in mine, leaving them in the ruins of the empire they had tried to steal. 6 months is both a lifetime and a blink of an eye when you are deconstructing a toxic empire. The fallout from that Monday afternoon in Tom Gallagher's boardroom was swift, brutal, and utterly silent. True to his word, Tom had the Bellevue mansion listed by Tuesday morning. Brenna Carmichael, fueled by the sheer audacity of what she had witnessed in that escrow office, worked like a woman possessed. She staged the massive, echoey house, aggressively marketed it to overseas tech executives, and sold it for $8.2 million in cash within 45 days. My mother didn't even pack her own boxes. Tom hired a sterile corporate moving company to box up her designer clothes and imported vases, transporting them directly to her new reality, a modest 1,200 square foot, two-bedroom condo in Linwood, Washington. The trust purchased the condo outright, ensuring she would never be homeless. But that was where my father's generosity officially ended. A strict, court-appointed fiduciary now managed her life. She received a prepaid debit card that reloaded with exactly $800 every Monday morning for her groceries and gas. Her water, electricity, and HOA fees were paid directly by the fiduciary firm. Through the grapevine, mostly from my father's old golfing buddies who couldn't resist gossiping, I heard that Evelyn Whitmore had become a pariah at the country club. Without her platinum cards to buy tables at charity galas or cover lavish champagne brunches, her friends evaporated into thin air. She spends her days bitterly complaining to anyone who will listen about her ungrateful, vindictive daughter. But she never crosses the legal line. She knows Tom Gallagher is watching, and she knows I hold the detonator to federal wire fraud charges. As for Nathan, his spectacular downfall was almost tragic to witness. Without the $2 million injection he was banking on from the stolen house equity, his cryptocurrency startup completely imploded. His unpaid developers locked him out of his own servers, and his investors, mostly gullible college friends, turned on him. With his trust fund severed and his credit completely destroyed, the golden boy was finally forced to enter the real world. Last I heard, a mutual acquaintance spotted Nathan working as an assistant manager at a mall kiosk that sells phone cases and screen protectors. The brother who used to crash Audis was now taking the city bus to work, but the sweetest victory of all didn't involve their suffering. It involved a visit to a pawn shop on Aurora Avenue. 2 days after the boardroom confrontation, Tom Gallagher walked into that shop, flanked by a private investigator and a cease and desist order. He legally unwound my mother's pawn transaction, reimbursing the shop from the trust and reclaiming my grandmother's sapphire necklace. When Tom handed me the small, velvet box in his office, I finally broke down, not out of grief, but out of profound, overwhelming relief. I held the heavy, glittering stones in my palm, knowing I would actually get to wear them walking down the aisle to Greg. With my family successfully excised from my daily existence, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who I was without their crises. For 5 years, I had been a warden, a bank manager, and an emotional punching bag. I was completely burnt out. So, I made the executive decision to fire myself. I promoted the vice president of my father's logistics company to CEO, retaining my seat on the board but removing myself from the day-to-day operations. I officially signed over the administrative management of the Whitmore Family Trust to a high-end wealth management firm. They would deal with the taxes, the investments, and my mother's pathetic weekly stipend. Then, Greg and I packed up our downtown Seattle apartment. I am, at my core, a deeply introverted person. The noise, the concrete, and the constant social pressure of the city had been suffocating me for years. I didn't want the Bellevue mansion. I didn't want the Medina waterfront property that my mother tried to steal. Instead, Greg and I bought a beautiful, unassuming cedar-shingled house nestled in a picturesque valley miles away from the city limits. It is a haven of fresh air, towering pine trees, and absolute cleanliness. There are no imported mahogany doors to hide behind, and no toxic family dinners to attend. It is simply ours. The landscapes around us look like a painting, completely isolated from the venom I grew up with. My Sunday mornings look vastly different now. I don't wake up to frantic voicemails or banking alerts. Instead, I wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and turn on soft, ambient music that fills the sunlit rooms. While Greg works in the garden, I actually clean the house myself. Sweeping the hardwood floors and wiping down the counters has become a ritual for me, a quiet, methodical solution that makes me feel completely relaxed and recharges my battery for the week ahead. Sometimes, in the evenings, Greg and I will curl up on the sofa and watch a romantic television drama, safely enjoying fictional chaos because our own lives are finally free of it. I used to think my father cursed me by making me the executor of his estate. I thought he had chained me to a sinking ship. But as I stand on my quiet porch, listening to the wind move through the trees, I realize he didn't give me a curse at all. He gave me the exact tools I needed to cut the anchor, save myself, and finally build a life of my own. Family is supposed to be a safe harbor. But sometimes, the people who share your blood are the very ones trying to drown you. Setting boundaries isn't an act of betrayal. It is an act of deep self-preservation. When toxic people show you exactly who they are and what they are willing to do for money, believe them the first time. Protect your peace at all costs.